Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas. Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado.
Because this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alicia.
I'm Nathan.
I'm Amy.
And I'm Steven.
Welcome to episode 170 of Adventures and Mousecapades. This week's guest got Nathan to do something that I have never been able to do in the 33 years that we have known each other: sit down and watch a horror movie. Even though the movie is in the horror comedy category, Nathan still insisted that we watch during the day and would not let us close the blinds.
Hey, at least I watched it.
He gave it a chance, and that's what matters.
Yes.
Exactly.
We're honored.
I'm so proud of you, Nathan.
Oh, anything for content, dear.
Anyway, as many of you may have heard, the very first Mickey Mouse cartoon, Steamboat Willie, hit public domain last year. Similar to Winnie the Pooh's appearance in 2023's Blood and Honey, the main mouse has jumped ship to the world of horror with this new movie, Screamboat, making waves this week with its theatrical debut on April 2nd.
Woo! We were lucky enough to get connected to the movie's director, Steven LaMorte, and producer and on-screen star of the movie, Amy Schumacher. Steven previously directed The Mean One, a horror take on the Grinch's story, and now he's taking on an even more beloved character. Amy's a producer, actor, and stunt performer, and has been in numerous shows and movies, including portraying the mayor in The Mean One and an EMT on the Staten Island ferry named Mortimer here in Screamboat. It's also worth noting that off-screen, Steven and Amy hang out a lot since, in addition to being talented storytellers who are often collaboratives, they also happen to be married.
We happen to be married.
To be married. So with that introduction, welcome Steven and Amy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thanks for having us. We are very much married. We're husband and wife, directing and producing team. Before we got married, I used to think the director was the boss. And then after we got married, my opinion has since evolved, and I think it's the producer now.
Good. Very good.
Of course.
We like to say the family that slays together stays together. And
There you go.
I love that.
Well, before we get into the movie, would you mind both sharing what your Disney background is like? Was the world of the mouse a big deal for you or your families growing up?
Yes, for me, it definitely was. I grew up in Seattle, so going to Disneyland was a really big deal. And I can vividly remember specific times where we got to get out of school because we were going on a family vacation. And Disneyland was definitely where we went. But I also grew up with, the VHS tapes of some of the classic stories. Me and my sister would know every single word to them. And now, married here in California, we hit up Disneyland. We love it.
Awesome.
And for me, I grew up in a single mom household. So I spent a lot of time with Disney VHS tapes. It was everything for me. I had Mickey Mouse stuff as early as I could remember. I had a little Mickey Mouse that was, I think it was my size, like a little stuffed animal when I was physically born. It's physically the size of me, and that was why they got it. And then it was everything. I had the sing-along tapes I used to make everybody watch. We used to go to the parks. I have so many amazing, vivid memories of going to the parks, and I follow the snack blogs with all the new treats. I follow the drink around the world at Epcot, and my favorite thing is extraterrestrial. I mean, I'm a deep cut Disney guy. I don't know if they'll ever let me, but this movie was my way of finally becoming an Imagineer. I've always wanted to design rides, and
I love that.
not just from the standpoint of what's it like to be on the ride, but what's it like to be on the line? What's the lore surrounding the ride? The fact that the Haunted Mansion has changed backstories multiple times, and they can, all of that stuff just is in my blood. I love it so much.
That's awesome. Well, Disney is absolutely known for storytelling, and so it's great to kind of see that passion that you've always had get to play out on screen like this. So it's pretty neat.
There are so many Disney Easter eggs, not just in the film, but behind the scenes that I don't know how much I can give away without giving up too many story beats, but the film has a lot of special effects and creative builds, and a bunch of them are actually taken from original Walt Disney like plans for how they executed things like the Haunted Mansion and things like the Tower of Terror. Literally, the way they were designed inspired the way that we had to execute some of these things because we're an independent film, so we can't just use a bunch of computer-generated trickery to do some of the big crazy things that I wanted to do on screen. So we're using miniatures and models and forced perspective and Darby O'Gilly kind of stuff, like all kinds of crazy things that whether or not he appreciates the context, I think Walt would be proud of the approach and the execution, pun intended.
Well, we absolutely noted all those.
Oh, yes.
But I will digress because I've always wanted to do this. I'm going to read your blurb here. A late night boat ride turns into a desperate fight for survival in New York City when a mischievous mouse becomes a monstrous reality. Can a motley crew survive a killer creature with a taste for tourists? Screamboat, coming to select theaters near you. All right, so now everybody knows what this is about. What drew you to this story to tell specifically?
Well, I've always wanted to make a horror film on the Staten Island ferry. It's been sort of a weird little idea, pet project of mine ever since I grew up in New York City and was traveling on the ferry back and forth going to college. I've always thought, man, on the Orient Express, you could just get off the train.
Right.
And on a commuter ferry, once that boat leaves, it's 22 minutes of terror, especially in New York City at late night. So I thought, well, why don't we should do a horror movie based on like a monster on the Staten Island ferry. And once it became clear that Steamboat Willie was going to come into the public domain, I said, this is perfect. We needed to follow up to the mean one. And I thought, I mean, there's no way they're going to let him go into the public domain, but let's just start pulling on this thread and see what happens. And one thing led to another. It became clear as we got closer to the end of 2023 that he was going to go into the public domain. And then I did a little bit of research, and it turns out the Staten Island ferry was powered on steam. And so I was like, this is perfect. We've got Steamboat Willie. He's going to be our monstrous and mischievous, murderous mouse. And we'll put him on a ferry with the backdrop of the greatest city in the world, New York City. How can you go wrong?
Why do you think horror is one of the first genres where we're seeing classic IP like Winnie the Pooh and Steamboat Willie show up after hitting the public domain?
One of the elements of it, and Stephen, you mentioned this quite a bit, that we love about it is that it takes some of the characters that we loved in our childhood and gives them more of an adult appeal, or a revisiting of it, which I think is really cool. And there's an element of spinning something on its head that gets us excited. I want to see what that's about. I want to explore what that might look like. That's sort of fun. For us, it's trying to honor the IP in a new, different way. It's not, on Disney or anything like that, or the character. I hope that you guys could see the love for Disney in our movie.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's something we were really striving for.
Yeah, that was great segue, checks in the mail. There are so many, and you mentioned this earlier, Stephen, so many Easter eggs sprinkled throughout the film. You've got there's a bachelorette party styled after like a bunch of the princesses, lots of character names like Pete the deckhand, obviously the main Mickey nemesis there. The bicyclist that's clearly Disney bounding is Peter Pan. There's a ton of one-liners in the script that reference other characters and stories. This script was clearly a labor of love, and obviously the rest of the movie as well. The Jungle Cruise would be proud of a lot of the puns and one-liners that y'all worked into this. How long did that take to put together?
I think, Stephen wrote the script along with a couple of other writers, but I think to this moment, until the cut, the edit, everything was done, we were still finding places that I felt like they could be put in.
Yeah.
Right. And on set, once our mindset was in, like, even as actors, our mindset was in the Disney pun realm. It was like, oh, I can come up with more. There are times we've watched the movie at fan screenings. I'm like, we missed one. We should have done this,
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of elements too, where I find our script was long. It was 110 pages for, a 100-minute movie. So I like to put lots of extra jokes just into the script. And then when we get onto set, or even when we get into the edit, we prune and we pick which ones land and which ones work and which ones don't. So I definitely have a whole pile of references that didn't make it into the movie. And there's a whole bunch of references that we shot that had to be cut because the movie just needed to keep going. How long can they keep throwing in these one-liners? It's the backside of water. Like, okay, we get it. Move on. Like there's someone's trying to kill you. You need to keep going. But the cool thing is that because the jokes, I'd like to believe, sometimes are organic, it feels earned, and then sometimes they come out of left field and it lets me put a joke where no joke belongs. And I think, it's very Jungle Cruise. I mean, that's sort of what we're going for. And it can become kind of tricky to broadcast to people that it's a loving, we're poking loving fun at Disney and not, we have some kind of negative opinion about anything. We can mock them for their corporate culture or the rising prices, but we do still love the characters and the story. And, Mickey Mouse comes out and to do a show or on a parade, and the adults are cheering just as loud as the kids. And so the idea to sort of revisit that nostalgia and reconnect with characters we love. I mean, they're playing Steamboat Willie. I don't know if they're doing it in Disney World. In Disneyland, it's playing at a theater on loop.
Yeah.
So, to go in there and see that and be like, it's still funny to watch him tapping his toe and whistling and the stuff with the hook and I think it's a cow. I mean, all of it is just, I think it still works. And so being able to have fun with something that you're familiar with, but engage with it in a new way, I think has been a blast. Everyone is excited when the mouse comes out, for sure.
It clearly comes across as from a loving and appreciative perspective. It at least to us did not come across as any sort of negative or slight on Disney. Like there's so many layers of references that are going on to Disney. Like it's clear that this is like made by hardcore Disney lovers. Did you by any chance happen to like keep a counter of how many references that you made in the movie?
Or that made it into the film. Yeah.
That made it into the film.
Yeah.
I know I had to make sure there was at least 33. So I know there's definitely that many. There's more. It depends on if you count. We got into a little bit of a discussion. It depends on if you count one shot as one reference or one shot as multiple references. Because there are some instances where there will be like multiple references in one frame. Does that count as one or does that count as five? I think it counts as five.
I agree.
We had a really fun experience after a fan screening where some fans came over to us, or some people had just seen the movie, and they came over to us and they said, "We caught this reference and this reference and this one." And Steven and I were like,
Yes,
those are intentional references. Yes.
We did do that one. Good eye.
So, there were a couple of her ones that she was finding because she was a huge Disney lover that she was finding. We were like, oh, actually, okay, I do see that. And others were like, it's way off. But I love that they're trying to find some. And our makeup artist and art department also have told us they put some hidden willies within like the blood splatters and on the wall.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
So I know where at least one of them is.
Yeah, there's 3 that I'm aware of that they'll be in a room and it's not blood, but at least I don't think it's blood, but there's like dirt on the wall and they're like, just so you know, if you look close, it's 3 circles. I was like, oh my God, we're gonna get in trouble. Put a hat on those 3 circles or we're going to Disney jail.
Well, speaking of that, did you have to cut anything for fear of getting in trouble with Disney? We noticed that you're very particular in saying Willie and not Mickey. Was that due to copyright?
We spoke with a lawyer before we did anything. Mm-hmm. Part of that was because we did, like we said, we want to honor the IP. So we didn't want to do anything that wasn't free for us to be using.
Yeah.
I mean, we toe the line, let's be honest. But we ran the photos and the character drawings and outlines of scripts before we even would move forward. So all of that had been approved by a copyright, IP lawyer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a difference between an homage and straight up like stealing, for sure. So we have a lot of Disney inspired elements in the film.
Sure.
And then a sentence like "be our guest." I mean, those are just words. It doesn't mean anything. You could invite anyone to be your guest anywhere, right?
Right.
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things like that. There's some things that if you're in the know, we're like, oh, there's tunnels under the Staten Island Ferry. There, it's like secret passageways. Like, okay, you can't. How can you even trademark that idea, right?
Right.
So there's some stuff like that, and then there's
a blue dress or teal pants with a purple top.
Yeah.
Like,
could be anything.
Could
be anything. So I mean, there's definitely care and attention that was put into it. In addition to saying that we're we didn't want any of the stuff to be distracting. We wanted it to be organic.
Yeah.
And so it was really just making sure that the film can be seen by as many people as possible by abiding by the rules. We didn't want to call it something it's not. We don't want to accidentally have a kid stumble onto the movie because it's fun, it's funny, but it is a gory horror film. Like it's not for kids, you know? So part of it was to give us the maximum reach, but also we wanted to be honest with people about what we made. It is a fun horror comedy. It is horror, but it is fun. And we wouldn't want like a letter or a lawyer to get in the way of a lot of people seeing this movie together and having fun in the theater, watching and laughing at a Little Murder Muppet.
So, Steven, from a directorial perspective, Disney's known for its magical storytelling. We've talked a lot about that. How did you balance that kind of whimsical Disney-esque point of view with the darker tones of horror that come across in, what Screamboat or a lot of the other movies that you've done?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to sort of the tone and deciding early on that in real life, when people die, we mourn them, right? And it's shocking and it's traumatic and people deal with it differently. So we kind of felt like by committing to a tone where the movie was going to be light and breezy and it was going to keep going and just keep moving and not sit and linger in sadness for too long, by making it one night, helped to sort of keep the thing driving and keep it fun, right? I mean, in the Avengers, half of everything died and they were still found a way to crack jokes eventually. So, I really think it was just a practice of working with the actors and working with the team and writing the script to make sure that we didn't take it to negative town for too long, because that's not the movie we made. And it's not meant to be, there's different kinds of horror. It's one of the things I love about horror, because I'm not into the really like torture, gory, dour, bummer territory. That's not what I'm into. I like thrills and I like a little bit of suspense, but I don't want you to go home wondering like, oh, is Steamboat Willie in your closet? Or, should you reevaluate your life choices as a person? Right. Like, the movie we made is intentionally fun. And that's one of the reasons also how we decide who's going to die, or, how are these characters set up, because we want to keep the audience guessing, but we don't want to pull the rug out from under them or make something that's going to really be a big bummer. I'm not into movies like that. We wanted something fun and thrilling, not sad and, exploitative or any kind of objectifying people or glorifying violence. Because, the big thing with Willie, and this is something we established early on when people were trying to dial it in, because you work with the same creatives regardless of what you're doing. The blood guy is a blood guy, whether you're making a torture movie or a comedy movie, right? It's still the same blood guy. So just making sure that everyone is in alignment of watching the references and sort of knowing what we're going for, and committing to, okay, guys, if you ever have a question, if we're going to pick between funny or scary, we're always going to go funny. And if we were to look at sort of our inspirations and what we're going for, we're not trying to horrify people. We're trying to shock them into laughter, because Willie doesn't know he's real. And that's the baseline of everything he does, is he's a cartoon who doesn't know he's real. So he doesn't know that if he pokes you, you'll bleed, or if he drops something on you, you're filled with a cartoonish amount of blood, but he doesn't know that humans are not cartoon characters. So I think sort of coming up with that guiding line and making sure everyone knows, like, hey, we're not trying to gross people out, we're trying to make them laugh, helped everyone to sort of get on board of like, oh no, this is not that movie, this is this movie. Yeah. Let's make our creative choices accordingly. And hopefully the whole thing comes together tonally to reflect that.
Well, I know like our kids were right along with that and loved the whole thing. Our daughter's 20, our son's 13 and a half. And at one point, they were sitting on the couch next to us and rooting for the mouse to go after a couple of the characters. So
Yeah. I think I know which scene you mean.
Amy, on the production side, what was your vision for Screamboat, and how did you ensure that the film stayed true to its unique blend of horror and comedy?
Kind of what Steven touched on, as a couple, as producers, but myself as a producer, I want to create a theatrical experience that's fun. I'm not that fond of going to a movie that is dour or, you're going to leave feeling sad or, like a drama. Okay, that's one thing. But for this one, I just wanted to make sure we were creating a fun time at the movies.
Yeah.
And on set, then as a producer, that was important that everyone was also having fun. They understood what we were kind of making. And when we had some of the elements of the movie come onto set, we saw people would take pictures. People were laughing and having a good time. And that's how we sort of knew that we were onto something, because if everyone in the room cracked up at the same time while we're making it, we're like, okay, this is working.
Yeah.
And so that element of it was really important to me. I like comedy. I like, my tone of a horror movie is more like Zombieland and movies in that tone versus, heavy slasher stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And then being, Amy, in front of the camera, what was special about this film for you? What's it like being an actor working for your husband as a director who's also working for you as a producer?
Yeah, we found a really good balance with it. We've done it a lot at this point. It's actually how we met on set in that same scenario.
Yeah.
And I sat with the script for longer than anyone else because I was part of, every iteration of the script. So I'd been envisioning Amber in this world for quite a long time. So once we finally got to set, I just got to play and have a lot of fun. And my character, maybe more so than some of the others, gets to really interact with Willie and have, some pretty cool scenes with the character.
Yeah.
That was really fun for me. Overall, I would choose being an actor over a producer. So my actor days are my most fun for sure.
Awesome.
The movie is set on an old Staten Island ferry in New York City named the Mortimer, which is excellent Disney reference to Mickey's original name from Walt right off the bat, by the way.
Thank you.
You actually got to shoot on an old Staten Island ferry that Colin Jost and Pete Davidson from Saturday Night Live own. How the heck did that come about, and what do they use it for usually?
It's a decommissioned Staten Island ferry.
We can't comment on who owns it or how we got it.
Sorry, we'll take that out.
No, you're welcome
no,
to.
you're
It's
welcome
totally
to leave
fine.
it. You're welcome to leave it in. We can't comment on the very public and obvious information that's floating around at major trade publications
Yes.
and gossip rags all around the internet. We can't comment on it, but you are more than welcome to make your own inferences.
We got, we were so not necessarily lucky, but we were blessed as independent producers to get to have access to a decommissioned ferry, because otherwise being able to shoot for long hours, being there for 24 days in a row, it was a really important element, because you've seen the ferry is a character in our movie.
Yeah.
And so if we didn't have access to that, it just wasn't going to work. So it was incredibly important. But, these Staten Island guys, they all got a little team, a little club you got to be a part of. They'll pull strings for each other pretty quickly.
That we do. We're very fortunate that there's a lot of really cool independent filmmaking. I mean, there's always been great independent filmmaking coming out of New York, but there's a lot of there goes the chonky one. There's a lot of
cat. We're talking about
the cat. Yes. There's a lot of really awesome independent filmmaking coming out of New York, and Staten Island gets a bad rap for being the forgotten borough or the lost borough in New York City. But everybody I know from Staten Island, where I grew up, we're all really tight because we sort of have that shared camaraderie of like, oh yes, we're from this weird little island that's got its own quirks and personality and something and accents. Yes, an accent that I've worked very hard to reduce as long as I haven't had a few beers. But it's super cool to work with a community where, because we're so tight and because it's such a tight knit group, that I could call a couple of people and say, hey, here's what we're looking to do. And, unofficially, we're able to get help from the city of New York. Unofficially, we're able to get help from the owners of the boat and the owners of the dock in which the boat is located. And that was just something really, really cool, because whether we're allowed to really talk about it or not, the Staten Island really came together to help make this movie happen. And an independent film, a crazy man and his wife with a weird little dream, like being able to come together and have this giant 3,000 seat boat and go to the engine room and travel back and forth in Manhattan. I mean, it's like, there's never been a feature film shot completely on the Staten Island ferry before. And the only reason why it was possible is because we were on Staten Island. So
That's so
It
cool.
was awesome, but not without its perils, because that
man.
boat is haunted for sure. The boat is haunted. It's in great condition, but it's definitely an
Creepy.
older. It's creepy. It's an older model, so it's got a little mileage on it.
You
Yeah.
can feel the history of it in the walls, like all the commutes. You can feel
And,
Yeah.
it.
and it sort
Yeah.
of feels like they decided to stop using it without telling anybody. So there are still cups and napkins with an old logo on it. Like their old menu sign is still there. Like there are clearly log books from the captains and stuff where it was like March 22nd, March 23rd, March 24th, and then it just stops. So
Yeah.
it really does feel sort of like there are some parts of the boat where they didn't decommission it. They just said, nope, we're not going in tomorrow.
Wow.
And so that was really cool because there was some set dressing there where it looked like these people were planning to come back to work tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it really was like almost like a little bit of a time capsule because, I mean, there are menu boards that show the old Starbucks logo because they used to sell Starbucks, and it's Starbucks is 2 words. Like that's how old this menu is. And a cup of coffee is like 75 cents. And you're like, okay, well, that's different. Main Street USA Starbucks is like, you got to take out a loan or something to pay for it. But this, so it was really cool because it's like a time capsule and it's all there. You could build a set that looks old, but it's not the same as really being on a real boat that has real graffiti and is so old. The women's bathroom has a makeup area, right?
Oh,
It
yeah,
has
it
like
does.
this weird like secretary's pool makeup area thing.
It's a separate room where secretaries would get on the ferry and do their makeup before they landed in the
Wow.
Manhattan side.
It's like
Wow.
a powder room, and the men's room is like a trough and like a rusty metal bucket, and the women's room has like lighting and chairs that are bolted down and like makeup and stuff. I mean, who knows where they were going? They could have been CEOs; they didn't have to just be secretaries. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's an old boat, so I think
Yeah.
the implication is a little, was what it was.
So what challenges did you face? We talked a little bit about like you had some amazing opportunities through having the set kind of almost built for you, or at least available to you. What challenges did you face in bringing this movie to life, and how did you overcome them?
Well, not to go back to the ferry, but just being on a boat of that size is not something that we in our pre-production planned for as well as maybe we could have, because we knew it was a big boat, but you don't realize just how many stairs are on a Staten Island ferry until you left something on the first floor and you're on the roof, So that, and then Steven's brilliant but insistence of making Willie small, 3 feet tall, was
Yeah.
a challenge in itself. It was a creative, really fun, artistic challenge. It was also technically challenging.
Technically challenging, yes. I mean, I appreciate that. It was a collective decision to decide to take the creative opportunity to make the mouse tiny. But we knew if we're going to do Steamboat Willie, we don't want to do a Steamboat Willie inspired serial killer or a Michael Myers slasher knockoff. We wanted to do a live action cartoon killer. So that meant he had to be a creature, and it meant that he had to be small. And not one to shy away from a challenge, we sort of went and looked at, because we're an independent film with limited resources, and we have a desire, especially horror fans, really like practical effects. In addition to, my love of Imagineering came from my love of magic. I wanted to be a magician before I realized that there'd be more money in Imagineering, and then, I could lie my way into producing. So here we are. But there is an element of like, how do you make the impossible possible? I mean, Walt Disney has a quote. It's kind of fun to do the impossible, and that's been like something I've had since before I even went to film school. Was something I really connected with. Of, just because it hasn't been doesn't mean it can't.
Right.
And so we looked at these opportunities and said, well, I have this big book of special effects. I think it ends at 2009 or something. Like it ends with the new Pirates of the Caribbean in Japan, I think, or Tokyo Disney or something like that. Like it ends there because it ends with like stagecraft and stuff. Yeah. And something we realized was because we don't necessarily have the resource or desire to lean into animation or visual effects, with the exception of the animation that's in the movie, which is awesome, is that we were going to have to do effects like they would have done them in the 50s and the 60s. And, looking at like the green screen in Mary Poppins is amazing because they had a magic crystal. I'm like, can we do something like that? Like, that's crazy. Like, they used to, nowadays, there's all of these shops that do the same kind of work over and over and over again. But back in the day, if you wanted to have Mary Poppins dance around with animated penguins, they had to sit down and dream that up.
Yeah.
So there was a real element of just telling everyone, okay, let's not talk about what we can't do, but let's talk about what are the ways in which we can achieve some of these things. So there are some shots where we're using as modern technology as the Mandalorian, where we're projecting the ferry boat behind David Howard Thornton, who plays the mouse, to make him look small. So, we have footage that we shot of the actors that's blown up behind them, and in camera, he looks small.
Yeah.
And then there are other shots where we place the actors really close to the camera and put the mouse really far away from the camera to make it seem like he was tiny, and again, have them be in the same shot. And then there are other things where we're using like puppets and old school gags and like hiding wires. We're not even removing the wires with special effects, just like hiding them in the set. I mean, there's one shot where the puppeteer is buried under trash. And if you look really closely, the trash is breathing because he's like under there sort of like hiding and moving around. I mean, there's one water gag where I said, we want to, I don't want to spoil too much, but there's a big sequence involving water and the ferry. And, I said, I want to fill this part of the ferry with water. And they're like, well, how are you going to do that? We can't really do a water tank, and we're not going to, the ferry seats 3,000. How are you going to flood the whole deck?
Right.
We're going to lose our security deposit if you go that route. And I said, well, let's just think the problem through backwards. And it harkened back to the that sequence where water is rising in the room is actually based on the Haunted Mansion. And the first show scene where the room stretches and everybody thinks the ceiling's going up, and in reality, you're in like a really slow elevator.
Yeah.
So I told the team, I said, well, what if instead of having the water rise, what if the elevator sank? So we built this area. Again, I'm trying not to spoil it. We built this area really tall. And then we're in the same level of water the whole time, and we're slowly removing things from under it. So the ceiling is actually coming down, but it looks like the water is rising. And I'm like, it's the reverse Haunted Mansion. It's like the stretching room.
Wow,
because I'm like, this is like the deepest Disney reference anyone's going to get, because if we've done our job right, no one will know the how or the why. But it's just little things like that where I just wanted to get creative and like, how do we pull this off? And once you see it in the film, I think you're just watching it and you're just seeing it unfold.
Yeah,
But it's just
I didn't make that connection at all. That came off really well.
Yes.
That was
Thank
great.
you. That's my little homage, because I was like, okay, well, the magic trick is we're showing you something over here while in reality we're doing something else over there. And
Right.
so this was one of those things where I just tried to think, like an Imagineer, I guess.
Well, and if we did it right, you don't think about it.
Right.
Like,
right.
how did this independent film flood an elevator? If that were indeed the scene.
If that were a scene, right? That we're talking about. So, but that's sort of the fun of it, and one of the reasons why we wanted to make this movie is we like the fun, thrilling sort of big screen, good times at the movies. And
Yeah.
so we wanted to not just do, she runs down the hall, or, oh, he trips and what's going to happen next? Like, we wanted to have it be fun and thrilling. And so that involved coming up with some crazy stuff. And then everyone going, as long as you know how to do it, let's do it. And then me going, okay, I have to go home and figure out how to do this. And I think we pulled it off.
Absolutely, you did.
Our daughter wanted us to ask how long it took David Howard Thornton to get into the Willie costume and makeup.
3 to 4 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Goodness.
Yes, he's a pro. I think the first 2 times it took about 4 hours, and then they got it down to about 3. And then once he was in it, because the ears is a cowl that he's basically like glued into.
Okay.
And then they put all the prosthetics that are built to his face on his face. So, it's maybe slightly more comfortable, but he can't breathe, through his nose. He can't hear, which is something we kept forgetting because his ears are giant and he can't hear anything. And so then he's in it all day because that stuff that's bolted on can't come off. So he would, at breaks or lunch, take off the furry suit and be in his white, like, Under Armour and just have this massive head on.
And
It
he's
was
just sitting
really
there
funny.
eating pasta, and he's got blood on his face, and his teeth are in, and he's got his black eyes, and he's just sitting there eating lunch, like, oh, I was in Sarasota this weekend, and we're like, I'm having lunch next to the top third of Steamboat Willie. It's
Yes,
insane.
and he's such a silly guy for a guy who plays, these horror characters. He's a goofball.
Yeah.
So, he brought a lot of that to the character that you saw. And Margaret Prentice is the woman who did his makeup, and she's a pro. I mean, I think
She's
she
done
cut her teeth in the 80s
Yeah.
on some big movies.
Like Predator, and she did RoboCop, just like big
Oh, wow.
makeup on all these crazy things. And we were very fortunate. We were like, hey, you want to take on a murderous Mickey Mouse? And she was like, hell yeah, sign me up. And it's so funny because one of the things that we knew in casting David, because he plays Art the Clown, because he's a gregarious guy, is that we knew we needed someone who wouldn't just stand there and menace people. He had to be a live action cartoon. So that's one part performance and one part the suit. We needed to build something where if he twisted around or danced, that he would still look like Steamboat Willie. There wouldn't be stitches or wires showing.
Right.
We couldn't, there are some people who were like, oh, how come he doesn't look like a theme park mascot? But if you really think about it, the mascot heads, even the animatronic ones, they can't emote that much.
Yeah.
Right.
And Willie, David, as playing Willie, like his eyebrows can move. He can move his ears. He can move his nose. He can make the circle with his mouth. He can whistle in the makeup.
Wow.
So, like, if we built him up and made him look like he stepped off of, stepped out of Fantasyland or something, or live from the Fantasmic, he would be like, you just wouldn't get that expression, and he can't
Right.
play a live action cartoon character. So it was important that the design wasn't just a little bit scary, but that he could perform in it, because that's what makes you connect to him. If he was just wearing a Mickey mask and his face was static, that's not Steamboat Willie, right? I mean, he's supposed to be fun.
And David is as big of a Disney fan as we are. He has sort of a photographic memory of Disney movies. I think the very first character he told this story that he played was Mickey Mouse. And
In
when
a Mickey Christmas.
like
and
when he heard the audience laugh, he knew this is what he wanted to do for the rest of his
wow.
life. So it's a full circle thing. So his movements, he went back and he studied, like, how would he move? What would his giggle be? What would his physicality be, so that he could reference Disney for the character, not just play a menacing creature, but play an homage to the character.
Oh, it comes across
Yeah,
that way too.
it really does.
It's so well done. Yeah.
And it's funny because it is a horror character, and the first time we saw him in the suit and the makeup, and he came in and he's doing the voice, even though we're like, David, you can't speak. The voice is not cleared. You may not say words. And he came in
And
and
he can do the voice
he can do the
to a
voice
T.
really
Oh, wow.
well. And every time he does it, like a Disney lawyer puts one more bullet in the chamber for us. But anyway, we have, he comes out and he's in the suit and he's like, so what are we doing first? And I'm like, the first thing you're going to do is give me a big hug, you fur ball. He's just so cute in
so
real
cute.
life. He's furry and he's fluffy. And, he does the scary scenes really well, of course.
Yeah.
But when he's just standing there and hanging out, like the whole crew started lining up to take pictures. I'm like, guys, we have to shoot something. I'm going to start charging you guys. Like, this is crazy. We can't all just take pictures with Steamboat Willie. But I mean, he's so fluffy and so furry, and he's the original design. So he's just, shorts and the gloves and the big feet and the hat. So, I mean, he's all fur. He's sweating the bullets in the suit.
Oh, man.
But when he stands there, he is on from the second he shows up on set to the second he goes to have his makeup taken off. So he cannot walk like a regular person when he's in the full Steamboat Willie suit. He has no choice but to saunter, to clomp, and thankfully
waddle around.
And you just forget his ears are, in the movie he's 3 feet tall, but when we're filming him with the hat and him being 6'1", he's like 6'4", so he's gigantic.
Wow.
You forget that because so he's got these big giant ears. So I'm like yelling direction at him because I'm all the way back behind the monitors and separated because he has to be far away to make him look small. And he can't hear anything I'm saying because not only are his giant ears completely non-functional, but they're also covering his real ears. So I have to walk all the way up to him while his helper is fanning him off to make sure he doesn't just pass out. it it was as funny behind the scenes as I think it is in the movie because it was a
But
preposterous endeavor.
I think all of that charm comes through. I don't know if you felt it, but at the end, there's a moment. I always have this moment of empathy for the character, and then I'm
Yeah.
like, oh wait, he's been doing bad things for 90 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't have empathy for this character, but I kind of do for a moment.
It absolutely comes through. And one of the other things that comes through is how much fun it was clear that the cast and crew was having making this. Like the performances, the execution, like I literally wrote down on this next question I was going to ask, like this looked like a lot of fun to make. So as you know, the cast and crew have seen the final outcome of their labor of love, what has been the internal impression? Do you guys feel like you nailed it?
I remember this moment because so much of it had to be done in post-production to make him small. When we were on set, even as an actor, there were moments where I'm like, you guys, I feel ridiculous. Is this working? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there was a moment when we were watching the very first sort of fan preview. And since we've made a couple of tweaks, but one of the other actors and producer, Mike Levy, leaned over and he's like, this is working. And it was like, oh, right. Because none of us fully knew. You knew, and we trusted you.
Thank you.
But none of us 100% knew, like, is this all going to click together? We're a little bit unsure. So of the actors that have seen it, they're all super stoked and super excited. But this upcoming week, all of the cast will get to see it.
That's right.
And
Excellent.
they haven't yet,
They
which
have
is going to
not
be
yet.
really fun.
Yeah, I mean, we know there are moments where it's 4:00 in the morning. You're standing in a puddle of fake blood that smells like maple syrup, and you're like, man, the puppet is not cooperating. Or okay, so the line is a preposterous Disney reference. Like, how do I even say this believably? And there can be a point where you question if the thing is going to work.
Yeah.
But then David comes out on set and we're doing, a classic Disney magic trick, or the puppet is there and you're looking through the monitor, you're looking at the, not just being on set, but looking at what we're actually filming, and you see that it's there. He's funny, the scene is working, and the whole crew has their phones out pirating our movie before we've even finished it. And you're like, okay, this is going to work. We know this is going to work. Making a movie is like a jigsaw puzzle. So you shoot one little piece at a time. And if we've done our jobs right, when we're finished, it all, it looks like the picture on the box. And I feel very confident as we've been showing it to people and they've been seeing it on the big screen. And we all worked so hard to make this movie because we're a tiny independent team comparatively. We're not a huge studio movie. Whenever people are getting their phones out, they want a picture with Willie, or they're like, they see a gag and they're like, it really works. Every single one of those moments, I think, pays off when you get to the theater and you see it all together and it's working and he's tiny and you're like, okay, this is not ridiculous. I mean, it is, but in a way that works, that we want it to.
Yeah.
And that's when it's really rewarding, because a lot of really talented artists came together and put a lot of trust in an idea, that's, I'm Italian, and from New York, so this might be a bad saying, but it's kind of like a Hawaiian pizza, where some of these things just do not belong together. But if they come together right and you have the right ingredients and people just trust a little bit, you actually can end up with something that together works really well.
And it's delicious.
And I am not allowed to comment as a New Yorker on my opinion of Hawaiian pizza.
What do you hope audiences will take away from Screamboat?
I hope that audiences will leave Screamboat with a smile on their face. We wanted to create something that would be a loving homage to something you're familiar with, Steamboat Willie, Disney, all things sort of fun childhood associated with that, but with a new horror twist. Maybe you have some thrills, maybe you have some laughs, you go with your friends, but we really wanted people to leave with a smile and just have a good time at the movies, maybe reconnect with something that they used to love and maybe it's not for them anymore. There are not a lot of like Steamboat Willie or Mickey Mouse cartoons that are really geared towards an older generation anymore, but that's still our guy. That's still the first one, the most iconic character in animation history. And so for me, being able to reconnect with something I loved and be reminded why I loved it in the first place, but see it in this new way, and I don't want to say modern, but adapted for a different kind of an audience, I think is it's like a dream come true. And we want to share that dream with the world.
Yeah.
And a big joy, I hope, the other theatrical audiences have, that we got to witness a couple of audiences have, is this moment where everyone in the room laughs together at the same time, elbows the person next to them, whispers, something, and then on their way out, they're talking to each other, and their energy is high and positive and joyful. Sounds crazy for a horror movie, but like this moment of like everyone in the room is coming together for a laugh or a good time and something theatrical. And so I hope audiences in theaters across the country get to experience something like that.
Well, I'm sure they will. I know our little family really, really enjoyed the movie, even though I'm not a huge fan of horror movies, but I still liked it a lot.
Oh, that's great.
Thank
We
you.
we appreciate it. We knew that we could satisfy horror audiences if we did a few things that they expect, but at the same time, I mean, it's like if you're not a fan of Disney stuff, but you like horror, you'll dig the movie. But if you are a fan of Disney stuff, I think you'll dig the movie even more. And that really is the film we made. And I'm so glad we got to talk after the last trailer came out and after you've seen the movie, because I think some people have this preconceived notion about what the film might be. And the fact is, it's a horror comedy. It's a fun time. It's a loving homage to all things Disney. And watching people, as Amy said, watching people elbow each other and be like, that's Mary Poppins. Or like, oh, look, I see that. And I'm in the theater. I'm like, I don't typically like when people talk during movies, but I'll allow that. That's pretty good. Good job. So I'm glad to know that when we hope people will know that this movie is for them and that they can come and have fun with Steamboat Willie and maybe have a few scares along the way.
Excellent. All right. Well, speaking of scary, it is time for Alicia's patented Disney torture test. But you guys are familiar with scary stuff, so just good luck.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's not patented and it's not a torture test.
Okay. All right. Excellent.
This is just your Disney favorites from across Mickey's umbrella. So Disney, Pixar, Star Wars, Marvel, stuff like that. Your favorite character?
Oh, man. Ariel.
I was going to say, for you, it's got to be Ariel.
Ariel.
For me, it's got to be either Gaston or Figment.
Wait, who's Figment?
Who's
The
Figment?
dragon.
Uh-oh.
dragon.
We'll cut that out.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
cut that out.
No.
No, we're trying to
Cut it
save.
out.
We're over here trying to start a movement and save Figment, and you are not.
I don't know
Oh
who
man.
Figment is.
Oh man. My
Somebody
mom is
needs
gonna
to
be
go to
so mad
Epcot.
at you. Oh, my mom's gonna be so mad at you. She's on the West Coast though. It's not her fault. He's like a pink dragon. He pops up.
Yeah.
And he's, imagination.
Yeah. I just can't picture him. You guys,
Oh my
I'm so
goodness.
sorry. I don't know.
I didn't know this was
No.
going to go like this. I'm
You
sorry.
just cut it out. You cut it out.
They're not. You can't.
No, this is gone.
No.
It's fine.
This is. I'm so embarrassed for you and for me. Really.
I shouldn't have said it out loud.
Who is that? That's okay.
We'll hang up and I'm like, hey, who was?
Who is that? You're gonna get a text from my mom. She's gonna be like, "We rode that when he was 7."
Favorite ride? Favorite movie?
Oh.
Wow, that's a tough one.
I mean, I want to say Little Mermaid again because it's the nostalgia movie for me
Yeah.
that Little Mermaid, Lion King, those ones, but Toy Story is just so good. I'm going to go with Toy Story.
Okay.
I'll say a favorite movie would probably be, because it's in the parks and it's technically owned by Disney now, would be Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes.
That stunt spectacular. My mom thinks that Amy should play one of the characters in the stunt spectacular, and I'm like, yeah. I mean,
love that.
we're really doing it for real, but the show sounds great too. But if it had to be something that was animated, then I have like a real soft spot for a Goofy movie, and I love that. There's like a new
Oh,
documentary
that's so
coming out
good.
soon about how they made that film, and our DP wore a Powerline Tour t-shirt
Nice.
on set one day, and I was like, that is the deepest cut, because it doesn't say Goofy movie, it just says like Powerline Tour,
Powerline, yeah.
summer of '92, and I was like, dude, seeing it eye to eye, man. We're gonna stand out. And he was like, yeah, that's it, exactly.
Do you have a favorite Disney ride?
Splash Mountain is my favorite.
She always it doesn't matter how cold it is, she always makes me do it.
Splash Mountain.
Well, it's a good thing because Tiana's Bayou Adventure is even wetter than Splash Mountain ever was. So
They're my favorite kind. I love it.
We haven't been on that one yet.
No.
Not since they refurbished it. For me, I would say it was favorite ride. That's tough. Which one? You've been
like
with me.
the
Which one do I
production
like?
design of Pirates of the Caribbean a lot. I like just going through the smell, that like
Yeah.
nostalgic smell in
I
there.
paid way too much for a Haunted Mansion smelling candle.
Oh yeah, that's
She's taught. She's like, where'd that come from? I'm like, you don't want to know. You don't wanna know. Okay, then I would say
You like Space Mountain, don't you? Oh,
I
you
do.
like the one where you go in the Star Wars, you sit in the chair with the glasses. I always have to sit out
Star
'cause
Tours.
it-
You can't
yeah,
do. Yeah, that one's a good one.
makes
No,
me a
the-
little nauseous.
The deep cuts for me would probably be, and something when people ask like, oh, if you could adapt a movie to be a ride, what would it be? It would be extraterrestrial.
Mm-hmm.
From the way back when, the horrifying alien knockoff. If it has to be a ride that's in service, then I would probably say the Haunted Mansion, because I like horror,
Yeah.
but I like scary things, but fun.
We always like to go do the little kitty ones when we go too.
Mhm.
The,
Oh yeah.
like,
The Rise of the Resistance is good,
Oh,
and
yeah,
and I would have a weird enjoyment. I remember riding the Frozen ride and being like, "Is this awesome? What is wrong? I am not the core audience for this." But
Disney World or Disneyland?
I'm gonna say Disneyland,
Disney World, come on!
but I've only ever
By
been to
sheer
Disney
volume.
World one time.
by sheer volume, and it like Disney World for sure.
I think Disney World is probably better because there's so much more.
But Disneyland has got some nostalgia
It
by sheer
does.
virtue of it coming first, and
Yeah.
them like beta testing a lot of stuff that they were going to really optimize when they got to.
I feel like every time I go, even doesn't matter how many times we've been. I mean, so many times, but I still walk in and remember the little kid version of me standing
Yeah.
in there, with my family.
Yep.
And you see the smaller castle because I went to Disney World first, and then I moved to Los Angeles, and I saw the castle and was like, this whole thing felt bigger. And then you realize you can look over the fence and you can see the highway in Anaheim, and you're like, all right, Disney World might have figured some stuff out when they made the Florida one.
The castle in Anaheim is just so cute. It's just
cute.
so
Right.
dainty.
Yeah.
Right.
Out of all the individual parks that you've been to, which one is your favorite?
Disneyland, I think, is my favorite.
The Disney, the original
Yeah,
Disneyland.
the original.
For me, it's always going to be Hollywood, RIP MGM Studios. That was always my
Yeah.
favorite. I always loved the Indiana Jones stunt show, and I didn't know I wanted to make movies back then.
Yeah.
But going and seeing the demonstrations of like, look, this is how they did the animation, and there's something very practical, something very
Yeah.
tactile about the creation of movies, like the technically making stuff, and so like being able to see, and we draw it like this and take these pictures like that. That's how
Yeah.
we make it seem like they're moving, and something about that always inspired me, and now here I am. So yeah, definitely Hollywood Studios.
California Adventure is really cool too. You can go do the drawing class
Mhm.
and draw some of these characters. That's always really cool.
Those are fun. Yeah. Have either of you been on a Disney cruise ship before?
I have not.
I
no.
have not.
Mhm.
All right.
No. Sorry.
Something to do. It's amazing.
I bet. I watched a whole documentary about it,
Mhm.
about how even like into the walls and the woodwork and everything, like
Oh,
every
yeah.
single detail.
Yeah. It's
we'd
The
like that.
storytelling's incredible.
yes.
Oh, cool.
We're gonna need a vacation after this movie comes out. Maybe we'll
That would be
maybe we'll go on a
perfect.
Disney cruise. We'll have to go under pseudonyms though. I don't know if we're allowed on Disney cruise. That's the last thing we want. Yeah, we just did our own Disney cruise. It's called Screamboat.
Yeah.
The skipper's gonna make us walk the plank.
Do you have a favorite Disney restaurant?
Ooh. Steven really loves a map at Disney, so we do plot out what we're eating when we get there.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Late night I'm on the phone looking up like, okay, what should our itinerary be so we can get all the snacks at the right time? For me, the Beauty and the Beast was always my favorite cartoon, like
Mhm.
growing up, just as far as the OG stuff. So going to be our guest
Yeah.
and like
Mhm.
sitting in the room. Everybody wants to sit in the ballroom. I wanted to sit in the room with the flour and all the like torn up stuff. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, it's the gray stuff. And they were like, and they're like, you can eat the cup. I was like, this is awesome. And they're like, sir, you are an adult. Please stop taking pictures of things. I'm like, it's reference. And then I'll write it off on my taxes. It's fine.
There you go.
Definitely be our guest. The restaurant in the Cinderella's castle is really cool too, because you're like in a castle.
Cool.
Yeah.
Being in the New Orleans square in the Pirates of the Caribbean is really cool too. You really feel like you're like outside.
But you love,
The
I mean,
Blue Bayou restaurant.
The Blue Bayou, yeah.
Yeah.
We've sat for longer than we probably should have, just eaten Dole Whip outside the tiki
Oh,
room.
Dole Whip is my
her favorite. She
I
loves
love
the
Dole
Dole
Whip.
Whip.
That's
Well,
my
that-
next question. Your favorite Disney snack?
Dole Whip for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
I'm
I
a,
love it. It's a must. Every time we go, I have to get it. And then I learned you could buy them at Costco, and we got them, and I'm like, it's just not the same.
It's not the same. Nope.
No, it's not the same. For me, it would be, I don't know if it counts as a snack, but they make an avocado margarita in Mexico in Epcot. And
Yep.
for some reason, it haunts my dreams. I think about going back to that avocado margarita. I don't know. Something about it.
You do
No
try
complaints.
that.
I
That sounds
talk
good.
about it. Yes, I talk about it a lot.
All right. Well, you survived. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now-
That wasn't very torturous. Give me a hard one.
We don't want to give out any spoilers for the end of the film, but are there any future projects that you both are excited about or currently working on? Can you share any hints at what's next?
Well, I mean, I think that some ideas as to what may happen in the future are definitely planted in Screamboat. So if you are, we can't comment on it too much because obviously you have to see the film to see just how it leaves it open and for what. But I can confidently say that there are lots of stories left to tell on the Staten Island Ferry with Steamboat Willie.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
references to be had.
And yes, and very familiar references to be had that we may or may not be working on right now. Allegedly.
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 Well, thank you so much, Amy and Steven, for joining us today. It was a pleasure getting to meet you and talk about this movie. Screamboat is out April 2nd at lots of theaters nationwide?
Oh, yeah.
Yes?
Not just
Excellent.
nationwide, around the world, actually.
Oh,
It'll
awesome.
be
Awesome.
April 2nd. It starts in America and Canada, and then it slowly starts rolling out in Europe, UK, Japan, Middle East. I mean, it's going to be everywhere. So people want to get in there and see it early.
That's
before,
awesome.
Before it floats around the world.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for joining us today, and best of luck on with the movie. And yeah, hopefully we'll see more from this storyline in the future.
Thank
I love
you
it.
so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
A few moments later.
Okay, that was amazing.
That was
to
fun.
have Steven and Amy on.
Yes.
I will say, as we mentioned, I am not a fan of horror movies. It's just not my jam. But y'all, I'm a convert, at least for this movie. I really love their take. It may not be for every single person in our audience.
Bear in mind, this is rated R. There is a lot of blood and other things.
Yes. There was one scene where I was like, oh, I'm watching this with my kids and this is awkward. But
Yep.
moving on. But it was so well done. And the Disney nerd in me appreciated every single frame that we saw. And a big shout out to Steven and Amy and Philip from their PR team for reaching out to us and coming on and talking with us, letting us see the movie a little early. It was great. Y'all go see this movie. It's fun. It's a good time. And with that, we are not affiliated with Disney, nor is Screamboat.
Yep.
And we're not affiliated with Screamboat either. These are our personal opinions and suggestions based on our own experiences. And we recommend working with a travel agent or contacting Disney directly to plan your perfect vacation.
If you have any questions or suggestions or would like to be interviewed on our show to share your own Disney experiences, please send an email to podcast@ourmousecapades.com.
Go ahead and give us a follow on social media. We're at Our Mousecapades. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, and YouTube.
Please give us a rating and review in your podcast app. It really helps people find us.
And of course, don't hesitate to share us with your friends and fellow Disney lovers of all ages.
Thank you for listening. We'll be in your ears next week.
I don't know. Bye, y'all.
Thank you for flying Star Tours. Bye-bye.